Well, here we are again, another jaunt into the internets with our fundraiser online this year, and we tell a lot of Russell stories about his forays into Madison Square Garden and how he seemingly infiltrated every square inch of the place. And we're here talking today with two of the people who helped facilitate that. Betsy Becker, who was an assistant to George Kalinsky, the official Madison Square Garden photographer, and she used to work on the floor at Madison Square Garden, and so she was one of Russell's tickets to be able to hang out and hobnob with people on the floor. But before all that, we're also going to talk with Steven Schnitzler, who has worked the main concierge desk at the VIP entrance to the garden, and without him, none of us would have been able to get in with the that we were. So welcome, guys.
Yeah.
Hello.
Well, it's a pleasure. And it's, should I reminisce for a moment?
Please.
Well, look, after almost 30 years at that concierge desk at the VIP entrance, you can imagine that I have entertained and dealt with people from the rich and the famous. And so many of them were wonderful, very sweet people, some not so nice. And then there was a category of a person, just one member, and that was the one and only Russell Ferber. And try to picture the Knicks in those days had a very good Pat Riley's team. I mean, Patrick and Oakley and Mason and Stark. So, I mean, the Knicks were good. So you can imagine how busy every game was. The place was packed. So on a typical Knicks night, my concierge area would have 20 or 30 people there a little early. And of course, there were always people trying to get in a little early before the garden opened. And they want to go up to their $1 million suite, or they want to go into the sports bar. And of course, the security guard at the head of the escalator would say no, because the garden is not open and no exceptions. And then so often I would see him pointing to me, and the people would then come over and say, well, Steven, can you speak to the garden? And I would say, no, I'm sorry, there's no exceptions. The garden is not open. And just as I turn down these people, in walks this young little guy walking past me, this little kid, and he goes, as he's walking by me, hiya, Steven. And I go, hiya, Russell. And then he walks over to the security guard at the head of the escalator, and the security guard smiles, puts his arm around him, and there goes Russell up the escalator. And then you could imagine a half a dozen people turning towards me with daggers in their eyes. Like, how come these guys? And I have to tell her, I said, well, you haven't been adopted by the Knicks. And this guy has actually been adopted by the New York Knickerbockers. And so when you say there's one and only Russell, my God, it was amazing. I mean, the Knicks in those days, at the end, after the games, a lot of them came down my way to go home. And Oakley would always have a table across the street at this Cafe 31.
Yep.
Ready to eat something. I'll bet, David, you and the family, you joined him a number of times. And as the players came down, I can't tell you how many times they would go, oh, this pair of sneakers, this is for Russell, or this picture, this is my autograph, can you give this to Russell? Russell. It was amazing. It's just... He's one of a kind. I mean, it's...
Well, you know, when he was very young. He was like 13 years old during the playoffs.
Yep.
When they all shaved their heads, and he shaved his head. I don't know if you remember that. But he was at school in Connecticut, and they took him to the barber in Greenwich, and the barber called David to say, little boy here says he's your son. He wants to shave his head. Is that okay? So David calls me. And the first thing, I said, hair grows back.
Hair grows back,
right?
At least at that age it did.
I mean,
Right.
we tell so many of these Russell stories, and people don't. It's hard to believe that they're true stories, because I always say Russell got away with things that nobody would even think to try to get away with. I always tell these stories about how, like, we would get to the Garden, like you say, it wasn't open yet. We would just walk in, and we would
exactly. And the point is that he always appreciated that experience. He never was rude or, a wise kid. No, he was always, he was
well behaved.
He enjoyed that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I can't tell you. I mean, I think in those days, the Knicks got new sneakers every night.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
they used to leave me hats and shirts and.
We definitely have a number of shoes of theirs at the house that don't fit any of us.
No, the size 15.
Right.
We put all of our feet together, we wouldn't be a size 15.
Well, so yeah, we would
I'll
get
take
to
that pair.
I remember getting to the Garden with Russell so many times so early that not only were they not letting people in yet, they weren't tearing tickets yet. We would get up to the floor. Betsy would be down there taking pictures.
Yeah,
And-
be down there working.
And I would tell people, and I also would have to tell people every night, and once you leave the Garden, you can't come back in. Once that ticket is yours. And yet, Russell back and forth, and I just have to say, well, you're not Russell.
Because he would go out with...
You may be worth $30 million, but you're not Russell. I mean, listen, the Knicks were great in those days. I mean, it was a hell of a team. In fact, when you have Pat Riley running the team, to be adopted by them, and a nice piece of trivia with the team, Pat Riley days, I remember being told that when some guy's coming down trying to make a layup, and Oakley and Mason, who are the two monsters, would knock this guy on the floor, it's an automatic $1,500 fine if any Knick puts his hands out to help the guy up.
Right.
That's what Riley said. No one, after you knock him down, you don't help him get up.
Wow.
Well, I know that Russell once snuck into the garage and stood by Pat Riley's car to get him to autograph an old card of his. Do you remember that story, Jordan?
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
And he did. But I also remember that when Russell went to the finals in Houston with Tracy, who was from the Garden, and it was very interesting. One day he calls me and he says, I have no money. I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, and where are you? He said, well, I'm at the hotel with he had slept that night with the ball boys at the Ritz-Carlton. So I said, well, he had $10. I said, whatever, go order the children's steak. That's only $10. Yeah. And he did. And then Starks sat down with him and he ended up not paying anything because Starks, but whatever, Russell mingles with the players.
Exactly. I'm not privy to how it started. Can someone tell me
the main
how
story,
it actually began?
The actual origin story, as I tell it anyway, started when, so during that period when the Knicks were a hot ticket, you needed to actually have club tickets even to get down to that level from the arena. So before we had season tickets, and I think for the first part of the year that when we did have season tickets, that 93 season, Russell would stand at the top of those escalators and ask people for their stubs so that he would be able to get down there.
And they would give him
and there was that entrance, the side entrance, the elevator where the players would come out of from the lock. When they came down from the locker room and had to walk across, there was a doorway that led to the back area there, and that's where all the players came out of. Russell would stand there along with a handful of other hopefuls to get an autograph. But ultimately,
Boy, he had it all figured.
and one day he needed a pen, and he ran back there to try to find a pen. And there was an office across from the elevator that these 3 women worked in. They handled all of the phone calls from club services. They handled all the club services for people that ordered things to their skyboxes. And Russell borrowed a pen from these girls, and the next thing you knew, he was there at every game, and he befriended them. He would get there. When we would walk in, we would go there first. He would drop off his jacket, his bag, all of his stuff. He would schmooze with the girls for a little bit.
Right.
And eventually,
wondered where his junk
and
went.
at that point, he didn't need an autograph from any of these players anymore because he had dozens of them. And
That's great. Yeah, that's great.
And he was himself a pretty savvy basketball player, in addition to being a very charming boy, just talking to people. But he started talking to the players about basketball, about games, about, and he had a very intelligent way of talking about stuff. He was able to talk to adults like they were peers. And he charmed a lot of people. They immediately adopted him that way.
He
Well, I
sure
remember
did have a charm.
when he first snuck into the locker room, he would say that Charles Smith was one of the people who said to him, "Who do you belong to, little Russ?" They didn't know who he belonged to, but and he always dressed to the teeth. I don't know if you remember. He always had he had a tie on and a white shirt.
When he was a little older,
Right.
not in the very beginning. It was just.
But he had a
I
business
remember
card.
claiming him as my relative.
That's
Right.
right. Yeah.
Sorry,
Right, so-
his father.
Do you
Tell
recall?
us about.
Yeah. Do you recall meeting him? Do you recall what that story would be?
Yes, the first time I met him, for some unknown reason, he was underfoot before people were supposed to be in the arena. And I looked at him and I said,
Crazy.
"Who are you?" He said, "My name is Russell." I said, "Good. What are you doing here?" He says, "Oh, I'm just hanging out." I said, "Good. Here, untangle this cord," and threw a huge thing of electric wire at him, which kept him busy for a few minutes.
But he
And
did it. No, right?
And then I got him, I put him to work. If you're in my way, you're either working or you're getting away. And then a few days later, Harry, the security guy, said to me, "Russell can't come on the floor anymore." I said, "Why not?" "Well, he doesn't really belong here." I said, "But we're related." He said, "Really?"
Oh, that's
I
good.
said, "Yes." I said, "Can we deal with this after the game? You've got people coming in 10 minutes and I have cameras that have to get up in the air." And he says, "Okay." So at the end, I looked at Russell and I said, "You better have a parent here tonight." He said, "Yeah, my dad." I said, "What's his name?" "It's David." And then he looks up at me and says, well, not up at me, and says, "What are you going to do? What are you going to say?" I said, "Just tell your father to go with whatever." I went into this whole thing about how, oh my goodness, second cousin David, I didn't realize that this Russell was, I haven't seen you since his bris.
Good story.
It just took forever, and I did enough of the blah, blah, blah. The security either got sick of listening or said, "Okay, you take responsibility for him. That's fine by me."
Right.
So I took responsibility.
What was that, around 93?
I think so.
93, 94. Actually, it started a little
90,
bit.
right.
I sent him to the All-Star game in the February of that year as well, of 94, I think. Of 93, maybe.
No, it would have been 94. The All-Star game is always after the new year.
Yeah, it's the next year.
Usually. in
Oh,
February.
okay. So anyway, but when he went to the finals, he didn't have. It was very difficult to get a ticket to the game. I had a lot of contacts through my business, and nobody was able to help me. And one day I get a call from a manager at one of the hotels that I had written about, and said, "I heard you're looking for tickets." He said, "I have 4 tickets, but they're in nosebleed country." I said, "Oh, I don't care." I said, "I only need 1 ticket. All he needs to do is get into the garden, get into the, I'm not worried about anything else," right? So sure enough, he got into the arena, or he was in the press room before that, Russell, he got into the press room somehow. And one of the journalists was saying, "Does anybody have extra tickets? Anybody have extra tickets?" Russell said, "I have 4 tickets, but they're in nosebleed country." He said, "You have 4 tickets? I'll trade you my seat in the journal in the press section, because then he could take his whole family." So Russell sat in the press section, like the 3rd row, and this journalist sat up in nosebleed country, but he had his whole family with him.
Oh man, that's great.
Well, you know, the story that I always tell also is that, you know, he would get to the game so early. He knew everybody there. Like, he knew the guys that took your ticket at the front, those security guards. He knew the guys that
No, the Knicks told all the security about him.
Yes, they did. They implemented security measures so that he wouldn't be able to get into the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, he would just walk by me. We'd talk with this and this, and then he would go. And after, like I said, after turning people down, then the security guards knew him. They would put their arms around him, and then up the escalator he'd go, and they don't even see a ticket.
Yeah.
And it was amazing.
He was
It
like
was
the
amazing.
honorary pet.
I wanted him not in the locker room.
Right, until he became good friends with Derek, because Derek actually got him a locker room pass so that he didn't have to deal with the hassles.
Right. Derek Harper got him a pass.
I used to say that he and Derek had play dates, and he drove me crazy.
Derek was a great guy.
Yeah,
So
he was.
it's funny. I think Betsy may have taken this photo. This particular photo we have. Russell actually ended up in the Knicks yearbook in 1995.
Yeah, that was me.
That's right.
He's in the Knicks yearbook. This photo is Russell and Derek Harper and Cal Ramsey.
That's
Oh
right.
wow, I never knew that. That's great.
And it's Cal Ramsey's profile picture in the 95 Knicks yearbook.
Well, he was community service and
Yeah.
outreach with players.
And you got to look at
One
Russell.
of the sweetest men I ever met, Cal. I
Yes.
knew Cal very well. Yeah.
You know, I once asked Cal if he'd seen Russell's brother, and he got so upset with me. He said, "You know, he has a name. It's not Russell's brother." I said, "Oh, I know, I'm the mother."
No, that was Herb Williams, I think, actually.
No, it was definitely Cal.
Okay.
Oh,
I
great.
screwed up on my story. I forgot. It was Derek who said to me, "I need someone to claim him as family because I come from a large family that I'm out of passes." And so I looked at him. I said, "Well, how do I claim him as mine?" And he looked at me and said, "You're both short, you have dark hair, dark eyes, and you're both Jewish." I said, "So how does that make us related?" He said, "You'll figure it out."
And you did.
It's very funny.
That's good stuff.
Well,
He
we
was
have
a
this.
good kid. Pain in the ass sometimes, but hey, that was part of his charm.
That's right.
Right.
He was not always easy, but he was always interesting.
That is for sure.
Yeah. 13 going on 31.
Right. But he never made it to 31, unfortunately. But
Created enough memories for a lot of
yeah.
for people who. Anyway,
Yeah. Well, you know, we still have lots of photos of, you know, beyond that one photo that Betsy took of him and Derek that ended up, we have pictures.
Oh,
of
that yearbook. That's a great story. Wow.
Yeah. And we still have the yearbook, you know, itself. So it's,
course.
in addition to having the great photo.
We have another great photo that Betsy gave Russell for his high school graduation, which is a picture of the team with Russell's face superimposed on, who was it?
Scotty Brooks?
Scotty Brooks, right. Exactly. They weren't exactly.
Yeah. In the pre-Photoshop era, got Russell on the team photo.
Right.
Cytex, baby, Cytex.
Well, it's really
It was
great to
fun
be able.
just being able to do that for him, to see his reaction, knowing how much he personally would cherish that photo.
Yeah.
Because what do you get for the ultimate Nick guy? The
Exactly.
Nick photo.
the rest of the team surrounding him on the bench
Yeah.
for a photo,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
even if he's wearing Scotty Brooks's body and jersey.
You know,
It was the most creative thing I could think of that he
Oh, no,
would
it was
have
great. It certainly wouldn't have fit on Herb Williams.
And we we have it at every benefit. We put it on one of the easels with those pictures of Russell. So
Yeah.
everybody's seen it. It's
Yeah, we've blown that
great,
one up.
yeah.
Blown that one up.
so,
And, I think it's funny that we always talk about how the Knicks kind of adopted Russell because in turn, we basically adopted Betsy.
True.
Very good.
The unofficial
got a good deal.
Ferber.
Yeah. Betsy
Very good.
Betsy has been instrumental. We would not be able to do our fundraiser every year the way that we have done it without her. She has been on our team from the get-go. She's been our photographer from day one. And beyond that, she has also done a lot of the emotional heavy lifting of dealing with the anxiety that my mother and I both put out on in the time surrounding the fundraiser itself. So,
Oh, and she puts together
And
the
all
raffle and the
all
auction.
the raffle organization.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, every year.
Well done, Betsy. Well done.
Thank you. It's actually a pleasure to do it because when the people go nuts that I'm dealing with, it reminds me of how nice and sane I am. Because Russell was such a big help to me when he would have a day off from school and I would get a call, how would you like slave labor? Great.
Right.
Tell him I'm buying Chinese
It wasn't a
food.
day off from school. You mean when he was
I'll
suspended
be
from school?
polite. And he was a tremendous help to me and he loved what I gave him to do, which was here.
Right.
Ideally away players.
well, I just love that, he definitely, like everything else, once Russell gets access, he tries his best not to, I think, take advantage, but he pushes the limits of whether or not he definitely sees where the lines are.
He reminded
listen-
me a lot of me when I was his age because I was always pushing envelopes and limits. And even working at the garden, I would I walked around the place like I owned it and no one told me I didn't. Everyone bowed to me. It was hysterical. I had all the union guys. Everyone would do. I would just have to look in a direction and someone would say, oh, I'll get that. I'll do that. And it wasn't their job, but they would do it for me.
Right.
And, the good, you get good, you give good. It's a
Right.
pleasure.
Right.
Believe it or not, it really is a pleasure to be part of this foundation and part of making a good event.
Well, it's a special family.
I
Yeah,
always,
well,
you know,
I think it's really interesting too that, we became so, even though Russell charmed his way into every space and got everybody to love him, we also all became very friendly with Steven because at the end of games, we didn't know where Russell would be. It's like, we'll meet you by Steven,
exactly.
like it would be me and Russell at a game together. My dad wouldn't be able to get in because he didn't have a ticket at the end of the game. He'd have to wait there for us. So
And all the Knicks in those days, so many of them came down that way to go home.
Yeah, or to go out to eat.
When the world was a lot safer, so they were allowed to go down and walk out.
But Stephen, you had the advantage of being at the entrance closest to the parking garage that most of them used.
Right.
Yeah, right. 31st Street. So I mean, there was, they also some of them, used 33rd Street parking lot, but a lot of them liked this Cafe 31, and they would always grab a bite after. It was amazing. Those were great days.
They sure
They were. Maybe the Knicks will
It was
actually.
a sellout every night. It was a sellout. I mean, it was just, it was wonderful.
Hopefully one day we get back to those glory days again.
Yeah, why not?
Life in general.
And
And we'll all be able to go and enjoy it. That's.
If not us, who?
yeah, I mean, the last bunch of years, the best part about coming to the Garden has been seeing Steven.
Oh, thank you.
Not diminished.
And I always look forward to seeing you and Jordan and Dolores. Well, you don't come as much.
No, I
The
don't.
two
come-
guys come a lot.
Well, that's
Yeah.
good. That father-son bonding, is very important. So.
Well, it's
Well,
still,
I like Tom Thibodeau, so they have a good coach now.
yeah. I just think it's great that we still have all of these connections that when we do come to the Garden that we see all, that we're not only are we not the only ones that remember Russell, we also have maintained and created our own relationships with people at the Garden. And it's funny, we were talking,
Absolutely.
We talked yesterday with a couple of Russell's friends, and one of them described the experience of walking into the garden with him as similar to that scene in Goodfellas, where he just seemed to know everybody.
Yeah.
You know, everybody knew Russell.
Yeah.
You know, the people that at the front, he knew the people. You know, at every level, they all just, hey, Russell.
He did. He really did.
Remember
I mean,
the very first bar mitzvah gift he got
It was from Jeff Van Gundy.
was from Jeff Van Gundy.
I have a great story. When I took him out, I took him to New Jersey to see the Nets play. And I guess they were playing North Carolina because Muggsy Bogues was on the floor. And at halftime, even before halftime, Russell said, "You know, I don't have to sit with you." I said, "No, you don't have to sit with me. Just make sure that we catch up later." So of course, at halftime, I hear somebody saying, "Who's that kid on the floor playing with Muggsy Bogues?" Right? So at the end of the game, they had this demonstration from local kids playing a basketball game, and then I couldn't find Russell. I had no idea where he was, and the arena empties out, and I'm there still looking for Russell. So I see a security guard, and I said, "I'm looking for my son." I said, "I haven't seen him." I said, "He's wearing a striped T-shirt." Oh, he said, "Oh, I know who he's in the locker room."
Oh man, that's great. That's too much. Too much.
So it wasn't just the garden that he was able
Right.
to do. He was he could sneak around anybody. I mean, in Muggsy Bogues, if you remember, was very small for his. He was small of stature, and Russell was also very small of stature, and he grew to be much taller than we anticipated. But he was very little when he was younger, and he wanted to be a basketball player, and he was definitely vertically challenged. So,
Right.
At 5'9" or whatever he made it to, that's
no, but he was 5'2". I mean,
but at 5'9", which is
Right.
his max.
Right,
He wouldn't be a
but Muggsy was a hero because Muggsy was also very little.
Right.
Because he wasn't like Russell, but
Well, this has been so much fun. I really love being able to. It's great to be able to corroborate some of these Russell stories that sound like, you know, the things of myth and legend, but they are in fact true.
Yeah, but myth
Well,
works well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
And thank
Yes.
you for having me, Stephen. Good job.
I appreciate it. It just took me back. Yeah, it felt good talking about those days, and of course, the one and only.
Yeah, well,
great to
listen-
talk to you, Stephen, as well. And we look forward to seeing you soon, whenever we get to see people again.
Yeah, we sure hope to do that.
Oh, I would love that, boy. The life of a hermit's not for me. God almighty. All right, so I'm going to say farewell to everybody, and please stay well
and healthy.
and stay safe.
Yes,
You
yes.
Back at you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.